So comedian Andrew Schulz is popping up in the discourse again. He made some joking comments about how it's not manly to be a Democrat, I guess. Or I guess the way he started it was by saying it's not cool to be a Democrat anymore, and it's the implication being that it's cool or cooler to be a Republican. So he does this whole thing about how it's not cool to be a Democrat anymore, and that's only for men up below a certain height, essentially saying that it's little dick energy, which he's making fun of Democrats, which is fine. I don't have any issue with that. But then he goes on to kind of connect it to cutting people's dicks off. He makes a joke about that, saying that that's like what Democrats are into, I guess. And it's just interesting to me because it's such a funny time to be saying something like that as the Trump administration is getting on the rails and going after the targeted demographics that they promised they would go after pretty aggressively. And by making jokes like this, Andrew Schulz is essentially, he's trying to signal his masculinity, and he's trying to signal what the Republican Party has been signaling for a long time now, which is that the Republican Party is the party of masculinity and of men. And that's a big part of the selling point of Trump right now. And so while Andrew Schulz is obviously going to say, I'm just joking, and it's just a joke, blah, 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 I kind of resent the idea that when comedians tell me exactly what they think and how they think, that I'm supposed to just write it off. They can have as big of an impact and splash on the discourse and culture as their ability to build an audience will allow them to have. But for anybody to criticize the substance of what they're saying, that just makes them joyless, or they don't appreciate comedy, or they don't know what comedians do, whatever. And I like comedy. I enjoy comedians. I've never particularly been a fan of Andrew Schulz. I think he's been funny in some moments, but I think his personality is very off-putting. And there's just something a little disturbing about the way he's sort of put himself around, like, just sycophants who don't call him out on his behavior, and kind of brings people along on these diatribes that he's going on. And so I think Andrew Schulz is pretty clearly going in a right direction, a right-wing direction. I don't see him going the other way at any point, because what happens is these guys get in their right-wing echo chambers and they, say stuff like this over and over again, and they're kind of trying to poke the bear, kick the beehive. They're trying to get people upset at them. But then when that happens, they sort of cower and run for cover and play the victim, and that pushes them further to the right, because then all the right-wing people, the troll accounts on Twitter and wherever else, are basically like, oh, the intolerant left, and they're so woke, but they do this, and blah, blah, blah. And so last time Andrew Schulz made a splash, not that long ago, was because he made some weird comments about being Kendrick Lamar in response to a lyric where Kendrick did not say his name, but was pretty clearly referring to Andrew Schulz. And so his response to that was to just make a weird joke about it. So obviously he's going to make a joke. That's what he does. He's a comedian. That is the best way to respond in that situation. But to lean into this idea of physical domination is a choice, and it also reflects sort of what he's saying now with these comments about how being a Republican is cool. And he didn't say that, but I'm going to characterize his comments that way because that is, in effect, what he was saying. Because he was saying that being a Democrat is for pussies, basically, or it's not manly. So obviously the implication there is that being a Republican is the cooler or more manly option. And he's trying to make his sort of caveman version of a cultural critique. And I guess there is some truth to the fact that men are gravitating more to the Republican Party now. But on the whole, I don't know how true that is, but even regardless, to think that way, to me, even in your comedy, even as a way of making jokes, thinking that way is such a sign of a lack of seriousness and just a kind of a pathetic worldview, a lack of really any kind of worldview, right? Because like, if you're able to see what's happening with the Trump administration right now and how aggressively they are targeting people like immigrants and families, not too long ago, Andrew Schulz was pearl clutching about how people were coming after his family because of comments that he made. And I'm not saying that's right, but this is a guy who has a family. And so to distance yourself from the consequences of speaking favorably about Republicans and acting like you haven't played the victim in terms of family in the past, while Republicans are literally going after people's family with the specific goal of tearing people's families apart, which is what they did in the last Trump administration, and they're going to do it again, even worse this time. Before, it was just at the border, tearing, families apart, tearing kids away from their families. Some of those kids were never returned to their parents. But now they want to do it in America, and they want to strip citizenship from people who were born in America, who are citizens based on birthright citizenship. They want to revoke that so that basically entire families that exist in America can be removed. And literally while that's happening, and this is a podcast where they talk about the news, they talk about what's going on in the public discourse. And the commentary that Andrew Schulz wants to give is about how being a Democrat isn't manly. And I always want to be careful on this channel to not defend Democrats too much. What Andrew is saying is that, men who would identify themselves as a Democrat are, I guess, weak. I wouldn't necessarily identify myself as a Democrat. I'm more left-wing than that. But based on what he said, I mean, his comments apply to me because what he's really saying is people left of center. And he's identifying the fact that he is right of center. And it's just very telling. When somebody makes comments that kind of continually are reaching for attention, especially based around their own masculinity, what that tells you is that there's a real serious lack of security with that person, specifically in their masculinity. And that is exactly the kind of person who gravitates toward the Republican Party and Republican politics. So if you're a Democrat, or you voted for Democrats, or you're to the left of Democrats, wherever you are, and you believe in empathy towards trans people, towards immigrants, you believe in being a decent person who supports some level of liberalism in terms of bringing people into the conversation of America and having an inclusive nation that supports families of many different kinds of people, that is by far more masculine. The desire to protect and defend those people is leagues more masculine than this energy that we're getting from Republicans, where they're feeling the need to signal their masculinity through cruelty and through domination of the culture, which is what they want. I don't believe they've achieved that. To an extent they have, but that is the goal, is to achieve domination of the culture. And so when Andrew Schulz says this, that's what he's playing to. He sees that pattern and he wants to participate in it. He wants to feel like being more on the right side of things makes him more of a man, and that's the explanation. That's why he gravitates to it. It's kind of a way to not have to explain your own bigotry. And the fact that he was sitting next to Charlemagne the God when he was saying this, and Charlemagne didn't push back on it, he laughed about it. And look, I get it, they're joking around, but it's also, I'm sick of being told that because comedians don't take anything seriously, supposedly, that I'm not supposed to take what they say seriously. That when they tell me specifically what they think and believe, I'm not supposed to analyze that the same way that I would analyze anybody telling me what they think and believe. And yes, I can discern what a joke is. And that does make a difference in terms of what the intentions of what you're saying are. But sometimes telling the joke and believing what you're saying are not mutually exclusive at all. And a lot of these guys who talk about right-wing politics in their comedy are just trying to provide themselves cover by saying it's just a joke. Really, what they're doing is they're laundering their beliefs, and they're having an enormous impact on the culture. Everyone from Andrew Schulz to Joe Rogan to all the other grifters in between. I mean, these people have had an enormous effect on our culture. And so acting like I'm supposed to just ignore the implications of what he's saying because he's a comedian and because he does have free speech. He does have free speech. But I'm going to judge what you say based on the way you say it. And I'm also going to judge it based on the previous things that you've said and the way that you present your ideas in general. And so I think Andrew Schulz has created a big bubble for himself where he can say things like this and nobody takes it serious and blah, blah, blah. And to me, it's an indictment of his character. I think he has shallow, weak character. And if you need a political party to signal masculinity and dominance to you in order for you to feel safe, if that makes you feel secure, if you see what's happening with the Trump administration and the Republican Party in general and the direction they're going, and you feel secure in that environment, that is the biggest sign of weakness, because all that's being signaled is that the Republican Party is protecting you now. And that's part of Andrew Schultz's kind of calculation right now, is he can say shit like that, and he's going to be protected by the right-wing people that are now in his audience. And he is going to be protected at large by the government's approach to these type of issues. And I don't need that kind of protection. I don't need the government to protect me from what I want to say. Whether a Democrat's in power, whether a Republican's in power, I'm going to fight for the same people. I'm going to defend the same people. And my political beliefs are not based on the level of masculinity that I feel like I have. And there's no bigger red flag for a human being than feeling like you need to side with fascists in order to safely be masculine. Because what are you without that political structure? Where was this energy from Andrew Schulz before this type of fascism was on the rise? He's always done the kind of like racial comedy and whatever, okay. But we were not seeing him take a side so explicitly up until the fascist rhetoric from the right wing started to escalate. And so I'm not sure exactly what that indicates, but to me, it seems to say that he feels safer in this current environment. Maybe a lot of comedians do, because they feel like they're going to stop being canceled because woke isn't in power anymore, whatever. And maybe that's good for us, because that is going to allow us to really get a better idea of what these people actually think and believe. And as we see Elon Musk, going overseas to do these conferences with the AfD, a far right-wing party in Germany, he's trying to do the same thing in Germany that he did in America, which is essentially interfere and set the stage for the election to get the far right results of an election that he wants. And he's trying to do that all across Europe. And part of the reason that he was so successful in America is by creating the same type of cover and trying to create the same type of vibe, even if it's among the lamest people in the country, that being Republican is cool. And so it's not so much making a joke about that I take issue with, but uncritically helping to build the bulwark of Republicanism being cool in today's age, which is just a ridiculous notion. Obviously, some people like Republicans because they've either been misled or they have hate in their heart. And in a normal world, I wouldn't necessarily say that about Republicans, but talking about Trump and the current state of the Republican Party, it just is what it is. You can't support that unless you have a certain level of hatred in your heart, and certainly a lack of empathy. And that type of cynicism from comedians really has helped pave the road to where we're at. And I don't want to put too much, give them too much credit for where we're at culturally. Obviously, comedians only have so much power, but it is quite a bit. I mean, comedy has exploded. And I think a big part of what's fueling that continual growth and thriving in the comedy community is a lot of right-wing people who want to hear right-wing sentiments be aired out on a large platform. And there's plenty of people like Andrew Schulz, like Joe Rogan, that are willing to give that to them because it makes money and because they feel comfortable in that environment. It allows them to feel masculine. In my opinion, it's funnier to make fun of people who are not currently being targeted by the government. It's funnier to make fun of people who are not marginalized to such an extent that their very existence, their right to exist, is being questioned. Going after those people, I think that makes you weak. Makes you weak of the heart. It makes you weak of the mind. And that's what I see from a lot of comedians, especially who take this angle of the Republicans are the cool, manly side and the Democrats are the gay side. They are just not using their brains at all. And they're inflicting their lack of thoughts, their lack of any type of ability to use their brain. They're inflicting that upon the rest of us. And then when we say, hey, fuck off with that shit, maybe if you're going to make jokes, if you're going to speak on a public platform, maybe think about what you're saying for 5 seconds. Try to say something that has some substance. And we are supposed to be the cornballs for that. That's supposed to be you're the buzzkill and you're the person who is harshing the vibe. And really it's just a failure to read the room, right? Because again, we're talking about an administration that is accelerating its attacks on all kinds of people, all the people they promised to accelerate attacks on. And then you go on your platform and you make fun of those people, not Democrats, but trans people and immigrants in general. And so it's a cowardice. It's a lack of any type of actual political coherence. I think it's disqualifying in terms of speaking on anything that has any substance or value. It makes anything that Andrew Schulz might say in the future less valuable to me because I just see how shallow his thought process is. And it makes me look at Charlemagne the God a little bit questioningly. What are you doing still sitting next to this guy, man? What are you doing shielding this dude? And Charlemagne has criticized him on some things. I don't think that Charlemagne is quite as sycophantic as the other co-hosts that Andrew Schulz has on Flagrant. But, it's just depressing seeing people, not just somebody like Andrew Schulz, who has never really shown any particular merit when it comes to his worldview, but somebody like Charlemagne the God, who also is a flawed individual, but has some decent perspective. He's actually a decent communicator when it comes to left of center politics. And, that would have been a great moment to try to reframe the conversation and to reprimand your friend a little bit for the damage that he's doing with what he's saying. And I know there's people out there who are going to say that I'm soft because I'm criticizing a comedian on these terms. But to those people, I say, you're the ones who got us where we are. And if you voted for Trump and you got what you wanted, then that's great. And, it probably won't be too long before his policies affect you negatively. So we'll just wait for that to happen. But if you're not a Trump supporter and you're still the type of person who will defend the things that Andrew is saying, and if there's any chance that a person like that looks at what Trump is doing now and is appalled in the same way that most of us are, you're the type of person that got us to where we're at, and your willingness to entertain characters like Andrew Schulz is what is sort of denigrating our culture to the point where we have someone as dangerously incompetent as Donald Trump at the top of leadership. And to you, that's what masculinity is. To me, that's not what masculinity is. And I won't explain it to you either. I'll just tell you to get better role models, and maybe you'll figure it out.